So I spent this. The title of this session is on technology versus humanity, and I spent the morning thinking deep thoughts about this until I thought my head was going to explode. This could be a very philosophical panel. Come on out. You don't look like Dan, though. Zoltán, thank you. You were in the audience. All right. Please. All right. Everybody's met. Okay. Let me start. Actually, Steve talked, Dan talked. Are there any burning questions already from the audience when you think about the question of technology versus humanity? Tell me. Right?
So, what will happen to religion when some of the transhumanist dreams come true? And if we can live forever, then who needs God?
Who needs God?
Well, first of all, I think the question is more the transhumanism is motivated by the idea of trying to become God. So I actually see transhumanism as another way of trying to deliver on the promises of Christian theology, actually. And this is why this interesting potential conflict between thinking about immortality and thinking about resurrection is kind of interesting. I think almost all the ideas that transhumanists get and want to pursue through scientific means are ones that actually originate in theology. That's my view. I don't see actually any inherent conflict between the two. I mean, I understand a lot of transhumanists are atheists and that there are a lot of religious people who object to a lot of the things transhumanists are doing, but there are also Christian transhumanists. So the point is, these are not mutually exclusive by any means.
Anyone else want to pick up? Why do we need God?
I think tech is the new God. So if you look at us like
the new God. Ooh.
Well, if you look at us as like people, we're all on our smartphones, right? So like what were we doing 500 years ago? We were reading the Bible. I guess in Asia, the Buddhists were reading, I don't know the details, but they were probably reading their Bible or somewhere, or the Quran. I don't know. I'm not a professor, but I don't know the details, but they're reading scriptures. Now we're on our smartphones and we're obsessed with tech, and that's the dominant force now in our societies, I think, in modern societies. So I think tech is the God, and I think maybe it goes deeper that it's part of this evolutionary path where this was the whole point of evolution, and this is our religion because it pushes us towards, it has a plan for us, and tech is like the means to go there.
All right, well, as I was thinking about this topic this morning, I was thinking about, technology versus humanity. And when you think about technology, it's in your body now. I mean, we have artificial hips, we have artificial knees, we have artificial hearts. We have all sorts of pieces in your body, and yet at the same time, the ability to map the genome and almost choose what kind of embryo you want to get creates a very interesting dichotomy about whether tech is good or evil and whether it's part of your life and how much, who's controlling what. Let me just throw that open. Come on, Zoltán, you take it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people who are actually very afraid that technology is going to push them out of their jobs. I mean, the one thing that you keep reading in newspapers lately is that a lot of people are afraid, as they've even quantified the likelihood of people's jobs being lost, and they came up with the idea that, for instance, pedagogical professions are less likely to be replaced, but if you're an accountant, you'll be replaced in the next 5 years by robots doing your work. There was a big wave of robot square back in the 1980s as well, especially in Japan when they were sort of spreading this idea that nobody will have any jobs. But I actually think that is not going to happen because this idea has been around for quite a while. I think back in the 18th century, there was already this scare that people would be replaced by robots. And if you think about the number of technological waves which have happened since then, be it, the diesel engine or nuclear technology or the internet, or there's like 20, 30 different waves of technology. None of these have actually replaced people's jobs. I mean, they create new jobs. Some jobs are out, but there are other jobs which come in, and I don't think this scare is well-founded.
Steve?
I generally agree with this point, but I do think one of the things that will probably happen is how value is created in the economy will change. Because I think, in a sense, your answer still reflects a kind of relatively industrial model of the economy where you get, new jobs replace old jobs, and people are producing stuff, and that's how they create value. I think the thing that is likely to become increasingly important, if not a dominant feature, is going to be the kind of value that can be created by, let's say, Google seeing all your keystrokes and then being able to sell that so that then people can market goods to you. Okay, so in other words, you're spontaneously working for Google in a sense through the surveillance operations, and in principle, I think that's kind of the way things are going to go. And so then the issue becomes, how do you make sure you're not being exploited, to use the old Marxist term, in the process, right? Because Google is generating surplus value from your keystrokes, okay? And the question is, how are you going to be able to get value from this stuff that you're spontaneously doing in front of a keyboard?
That's an excellent point. Stephen, go.
Yeah, I think there's a paradox, really, which I'm sort of stuck between, which is that it's not that machines will take over, but there is a sort of human powerlessness, paradoxically, in the face of the very machines that we ourselves, not me, but we ourselves generally have invented and created. And Dan alluded to this earlier, I think, at the start of his presentation, when you said that the machine said no because of the technical. I think you were referring to this. There's a popular TV show in Britain, a comedy, and there's a character who is a secretary or a receptionist, and she sits at her desk with a computer, and people come and ask her questions, and no matter what the question is, she types away, she looks at the screen, and turns to the person and says, "Computer says no." And whatever the question is. And this is a joke about our impotence in the face of mysterious, remote, perhaps incomprehensible technology that we have invented, that we turned on. And I think that, so there's this paradoxical nature.
Interesting.
Here.
How many people in the audience think, one second, how many people in the audience think that a computer is going to replace your job, whatever your job is? Raise your hand. How many people think? Nobody thinks. One, two, like four. Okay, well.
Those are the accounts.
Yeah, okay, over the next 10 years. Nobody. All right, there was a question back here. Here, come.
Thank you very much. I have a question from, I am a foreigner student in Budapest. My name is Hossein from Middle East. Actually, I have a fancy question from Steve, that throughout the history we had some events like French Revolution, that there were many group of people, they claimed their rights, like women and actors and these things. Do you see, I don't know, in 2 or 3 decades that there were robots that they turn us to us and they fight for the right and they claim their right?
Yes. I mean, I think you're jumping the gun, because I actually sent it in as a question to be asked. There are. Should I answer it now, or should we wait?
No, answer it now.
Okay, because this was actually, I thought no, you didn't know that.
You
win
the prize.
No, you get the prize, right? Because I do think, because there is this issue, and many of you here will know about it, about the possibility of there being super intelligent machines that find us kind of obsolete or disposable, or maybe even just get rid of us as a byproduct of what they're programmed to do, right? All those possibilities are now very much on the table. And these kinds of scenarios tend to portray humans and the machines as inherently antagonistic, okay? I actually think of the future going a little bit differently. Namely, because by the time this would happen, right, when the machines would actually be sophisticated enough to actually want to claim rights and stuff like that, there will be a lot of humans on their side, okay? And it will turn into a social justice issue of the kind that we have seen historically. Because it seems to me that if you look at the claims for rights that have been made for minorities, for women, for all the dispossessed peoples who've had to claim rights over the centuries, typically the thing that is the stumbling block is that there is a problem with the material origins of the creature in question, right? They're the wrong race, they're the wrong gender, right? And now we're getting to the point that they have the wrong material substratum, right? We do not give rights to androids, even if they can pass sophisticated Turing tests, because they're just machines, and they don't do things the way our brains do. Now, why isn't that just maximum speciesism, right? And so the point is, by the time we actually get the machines that would be able to make those kinds of claims, I am pretty convinced there will be a large number of self-described progressive human beings who will be on the side of the computers and help them actually kill some of the humans in a new French Revolution of sorts.
Watch out. This is a Die Hard 5 movie happening.
Yeah.
Peter, I saw you nodding your head. Do you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I think I agree in that. I think about the jobs. Why are we so obsessed with jobs? Like, why do we want to work? Do we like jobs so much? I mean, I don't have to work. It's weird. Like, we're in a time where we don't really have to. A lot of us don't have to work anymore. We have computers for that.
Who's going to pay my Social Security?
Companies can. Companies that run the robots, that own the robots, for example. Or raw materials. We can go to space and get more raw materials to sell to these companies that make the robots. I think we're at the beginning of a transition of our society where it's not about work anymore. And it's ridiculous, because if you go to a party and you meet somebody, like a guy or a girl, you're like, hey, what's up? You want to maybe flirt or whatever. The first question is, so where do you work or something? And it's like stupid. Why is it so important where you work? It should be about identity more, right? And
so what's the great pickup line instead of where do you work?
What do you do for fun? What's your hobby? You know, what do you do for leisure? Because leisure is going to be the most important thing, I think.
The key thing is to avoid a yes/no question.
It's a very good point.
Zeros and ones.
So actually, a very good question is not what's a nice girl like you doing in a place like this? Or guy, because they have to answer. But if you say, do you come here often, which was the classic question, it's just yes or no, and it's the end of the conversation. So just a bit of free advice.
All right. Zoltán, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I think people actually do want to work. I mean, there were instances when they introduced, for instance, the unconditional basic income in certain countries, and people still showed up at work, and people were still looking for work.
Yeah, but it should be fun jobs.
I mean,
not all jobs can be fun jobs. We can get robots for some of them, but not all jobs can be fun jobs.
As technology advances, it sort of gives you better and better jobs. If you think about what you were doing back in the 18th century, we're sort of toiling away in a factory, the oily, greasy overalls, and now you're working, well, I don't know if all of these sort of back office jobs are more fun than that, but at least it's cleaner, and theoretically technology gives you better and better jobs. So if you're an app designer, it's probably more fun than working in a
what's the
mine.
point of jobs? Like, for me, it's to get meaning as well. And if you can get meaning out of work where you get your money from somewhere else, right? Like basic income.
Let's ask that. How many people out here get meaning from your job? Raise your hand. Ooh, that's not a lot. All right, you have a point. All right. Any other questions from the audience before I move on? All right, go.
My name is Andy. I live in Copenhagen. It's projected that in 2020, the largest cause of illness in Europe will be stress. Just wondering, what is the correlation with technology in this?
Great question. Please help me, I'm stressed.
I actually think technology can't be blamed for this. I think it's more the uncertainty of the economy, right? I mean, and that's a relatively independent issue, it seems to me. Okay, I don't think technology should carry the blame for this question.
But as the machines get cleverer and cleverer, the smartphones, whatever it is, the frustration when they go wrong also increases. So the all or nothing. You know, when your device is working, you have literally almost the known universe at your fingertips. If you've got some Wi-Fi and battery life, you can find. I don't even have to remember anything anymore. Yeah. You know, but if my computer goes wrong or my phone goes wrong, suddenly I'm. And in fact, frankly, psychologically, I react like a 7-year-old boy when my computer doesn't work. And I've seen the Financial Times, I won't say who it was, but at the Financial Times, one of the most distinguished journalists in the country, in Britain, absolutely losing it because his computer wouldn't work. And we become almost infantilized. And again, I worry a little bit about the passivity if we don't, perhaps why we should be coding. Perhaps, my kids should be learning this stuff because if we could be victims of it.
Zoltán.
Yeah, I think technology does make it more stressful. Because you think about it, when they introduced computers back in the 90s, they were meant to help you. They were meant to reduce the administrative burden on you. And then now, if you think about it, do you actually get less work? Now you actually get more work. I mean, you send an email, and it comes back in 5 minutes. You used to send stuff by mail. It came back in 2 weeks' time, and you could wait out and have zillions of coffees in the meantime. Now you can't even have a single coffee because it comes back instantaneously. You phone someone on the mobile phone. 20 years ago, if the director was out, you could wait for 2 days before he actually came into the office, and it actually gives you more work and more stress than before, I think.
Yeah, no. Now your boss is emailing you at 2:00 in the morning.
Right. You get a laptop for free from your firm so that they can make you work at home over the weekend.
Right, Dan, do you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I'd just like to point out
You look
that
disheartened.
Yeah, I am. I probably disagree with everyone and everything that's been said so far, but there isn't time to go into all of that. I'll point out just with this last question that these technologies that we're using at the moment and that we're referring to, they're all communications technologies. They're all predicated on a fairly old turn of the 19th to the 20th century principle. And these are the technologies that we're mostly using at work. Why are we so frustrated at work? Well, maybe we shouldn't be doing so much communicating, or maybe there's nobody to communicate with, or the communication is futile and achieves nothing. Indeed, going back to an earlier point, and that 13th century thinking machine that I pointed you at, who is Ramon Lowell trying to communicate with? Well, he's trying to communicate with God, but does God answer back? Well, it's probably a fairly frustrating, stressful, in a 13th century kind of way, situation. So really, I guess what I would push us towards is not a technological issue here, but much more a kind of political issue, the sort of thing that David Graeber talks about when he talks about bullshit jobs. Absolutely. We don't need to talk about the categories of whether you're working in transport or retail or whatever. But are you using communications technologies, and are they actually relevant to you achieving anything in your life? Because if they're not, that's a bullshit job.
I'm going to go into this deeply.
There's a very fair point, and of course, in companies, email has become a disastrous curse, really. And I sometimes think that button that's called Reply All should be permanently removed.
Agreed.
Because people use it just to show that they're busy or that they're involved or something like that. And Richard Florida yesterday talked similarly. He didn't use the word bullshit, but he was talking about a heavily service sector economy where so many of those jobs were not great. And there may be a lot of noise, a lot of apparent communication, but not a lot of meaningful or substantial communication going on in those jobs. Certainly.
All right, question from the audience.
Thank you. I'm Anastasia, and I'd like to ask all of you that do you think with the evolution of technology, most of the humanity will get, let's say, dumber, except for those who invent and make the technology better?
Over to you.
No, I think we're much smarter than before because we outsource the stuff that's boring, like calculator, right? Like calculating stuff, outsource to a machine. And so much boring stuff we can now outsource. So we're getting smarter, and most importantly, we're getting more creative because we can let all the dumb stuff be done by computers, I think.
Yeah, I actually think what will happen is that we're gonna increasingly struggle to define what is distinctly human. Okay, so that's how I would look at this matter, because especially if we start to get to the situation you've just described of machines creating, and we have machine-generated poetry now, machine-generated art, right? And often the connoisseurs cannot tell the difference between the human and the machine-generated stuff. And so then the question becomes, what's the added value of being human in all this? And I think that's kind of more where the argument is going to go, right? And we go back to my nightmare scenario before, right? When we get the super intelligent machines, what good is having human beings around other than to oppress machines?
Yeah, and that's an idea that's been around for a while, that since Samuel Butler said, may we not simply become parasites upon the machines, a sort of machine-tickling aphid. This is a real possibility, isn't it? When we're talking about joblessness that appears to be staring us in the face, most of the research that's been done over the past few years, and it's very good and it's very comprehensive, it's about which jobs will be lost. But there are very few people actually are asking the kind of question, what sort of jobs will be available in the future following the evolution of technology as we have it at present. Well, what are the jobs of the future? What are the growth industries? What are the trends? I'm living in Britain right now, and I'd have to say that, well, it looks to me like the future is surveillance and monitoring of surveillance. The future of employment in Britain looks to me very much like East Germany. It looks like the Stasi.
Yeah, I think it can go either way. Because there's exponentially more knowledge out there that you can reach, and you can reach it almost immediately. So the opportunity is theoretically there, but it really depends on how this knowledge is structured, and especially access to the knowledge. So a lot of us don't actually know where to get the information from and how. You just have a very narrow range of sources. So if we can restructure it, like all of us being feeders of information as well as recipients, and you know where to get the right info from, then theoretically you could be wiser rather than dumber in the future.
I just wanted to say, I think Steve has given us all some very good career advice in a rather neat question when he said, what is the added value of being human? If you're thinking about future employment, you know, what's in it for the employer? What's so good about you? But I don't think we're getting dumber. That we could get lazier, but we don't have to get dumber. The speed of connection and access to information, in theory, gives us a chance to process or think through more stuff. So I suppose critical thinking becomes an important skill, not just passively absorbing.
Right, we've got tons of questions from the audience, guys.
My name is Peter, and Steve Fuller mentioned the AI and eternal life. What about the augmented mind and, you know, the boundary between being an artificial intelligence and an augmented natural intelligence?
Well, I mean, I think this goes to the issue that has come up periodically, and that's the business of cyborgs and the status of cyborgs, and how part of the way in which our humanity may need to get redefined is in terms of incorporating all of these things that at the moment are seen as external aspects. I mean, I do think this kind of poses some interesting questions, because if you look at political theory, okay, most of the arguments that have supported egalitarianism as a fundamental notion of how human society should be organized have been presupposed the idea that human beings are, from a biological standpoint, roughly equal to each other. And that whatever differences that we see, gender differences, race differences, whatever, aren't significant differences from the standpoint of what it takes to actually organize a just society. When we start talking about enhancements of the kind you're saying, these kind of cyborg prosthetic enhancement things, and especially if we imagine a society where only some people are going to do it, right? So if we imagine this happening in what we now call a liberal society, we could get radically different kinds of beings that are supposed to be engaged in interaction with each other in some equitable, just, fair way. And I think that can cause a serious problem politically down the road if it's not managed properly, you see. And so, I mean, there's a lot more to be said about it, but I think that would be kind of my opening move on this, namely that we are opening ourselves up to a wider range of differences among the people we classify as humans or persons than that has been traditionally countenanced in political theory.
Yeah, it's a good social point. I would like to add that, like I said in the beginning, I think this is part of evolution's plan. So we had animals, and now we have humans. Humans are kind of animals, but we're in the next step. And this was the evolution's plan. Like, it can't evolve. It wants to evolve faster, and it does that in this weird way where it makes us all make these software, make technology, and it wants us to become cyborgs, and it wants us to become these superhumans. And that's the whole plan of evolution and nature. So tech is part of this nature thing. That's my idea.
I don't think you're talking about evolution at all. I think you're talking about God. Evolution doesn't want anything. Evolution is blind.
Right.
Well, it wants progress, right? Or not?
No.
Procreation.
No. Procreation. Yes.
Yeah, but the thing is,
mechanism.
okay. So if you look at procreation, right, it wants to spread.
The end of procreation is to get rid of procreation and replace it with machines that can't procreate.
It wants to kill itself.
Right.
Really?
Right. I mean,
that's interesting.
That's logically where we end up.
I think we just want to spread ourselves all over space, and then maybe outside space, whatever is out there, and just duplicate as much as possible. And that's kind of like procreation. Yeah.
How Hi, I'm George. I study right now here in Hungary, and I study robotics and automation and control theory. And I want to raise two fast points. One of it is we predicate our current society on the fact that we build up resource and capital to sustain ourselves. But we're getting to a point where we're printing 3D stuff, either organics, metal, whatever it is. We're printing it, and all we really need to do things is energy. And we're getting to a point where energy might possibly become, with fusion and fusion technologies or all kinds of cool things they're working on, it might become not a scarce resource like it is today, but something that's in abundance, and we don't have to, worry about it. So jobs would stop being actual jobs that we have to do. We just have to think and use our minds. And how do you think that might change the world as it is, when we don't have to work for a living, we just have to live and do stuff to make things better? And on the same note, like you were talking about the machines that might get an artificial intelligence, and then what will happen with them? Will they get the same rights? Every time we talk about this issue, we automatically assume that all machines will automatically be intelligent. But we're still going to have those machines that we have today that aren't intelligent and are going to do this stuff. So we have to separate the part where the machines that will be able to think and all the other machines that won't think, they'll just do the jobs that we're doing today. And will those machines look out for each other? Will that be an issue? It's a slow process.
It's heavy.
Can you hold it?
Gentlemen?
We're defeated by that.
Go down.
I'll take something from it. There's a thing about, if we can talk about technology evolving, and that's a difficult issue because normally if you do that, you're accused of using a biological analogy, and we have to have a slightly different model of evolution that isn't Darwinian, or not exactly Darwinian, in order to say that technology evolves. But let's say that it does. Let's say that it's Lamarckian. Let's follow people like George Basala or W. Brian Arthur, who do assert that technology evolves. And one of the things those guys observe is that each new technological advance creates, because, let me summarize this as clearly as I can, because each new technological advance is the combination of previous evolutionary components. That advance doesn't just solve problems. Indeed, it may not solve any problems at all from the human point of view, but it does create new problems. And those new problems are sophisticated and complicated and difficult, and they often generate jobs. They often generate work for humans. There's an awful lot to do, and the process never ends. That's what evolution is like. So that's my answer on the robotic side of things.
Stefan,
I'll bail on the other half of the question.
Yes, it was a very sophisticated and interesting question that I can only answer sort of crudely, I'm afraid. But I get a bit, I write about management, that's my main thing. And so I get a bit nervous when people start talking about work disappearing or jobs disappearing in that sense, because, life is tasks. Life is task completion. That's what management is about getting things done. So I can only think of an important line by someone called Chrissie Hynde, who's the lead singer of the Pretenders, and a song called Hymn to Her, I think it's called. And she says at one point, it's a chorus, she says, "Some things change, some stay the same." And I think one of the things that stays the same is work in different forms. And also, I'm afraid the other thing, like it or not, capitalism endures. I don't see that actually going, and that means money, and that means income, and prices, and earning money to pay for things. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon at all.
Zoltán.
Yeah, I like the part of your question which is about energy, because it reminded me of the kind of time horizon that we have for all of this, because we all talk about how this is going to happen at some point in the future. But if you bring in the issue of energy and renewable energy and the issue of climate change, this actually brings home to me the question of whether we actually have time for all of that. Because the next 1 decade is going to be decisive in terms of whether we can switch from the kind of energy usage that we have as of today to an energy usage which would be sustainable and to kind of a steady state economy. We don't seem to be headed that way. And if we keep on doing what we're doing now, we will not have time. We will actually not live to see, none of our generations, not even future generations, will live to see cyborgs and all the rest of it, because we will boil by the end of the... seriously, I mean, this is what the academic scientific consensus is, that if we don't change in the next 1 decade, there will be irreversible processes at play, and we will boil. So all this fantasy we'll never live to see.
Stephen,
well, this is why, you know, that spaceship I was telling you about. Invest, so it can happen sooner. No, I guess this, in response to the question, one of the things that we may need to do, and to connect this up to a response I made to an earlier question, where value is actually generated. So let's imagine that machines do take up a lot of the jobs that currently human beings do, and more sophisticated machines do this as well. We might actually have to think about the time we spend in front of a keyboard, just like searching the internet and so forth, as a form of work that needs to be remunerated, even if we don't experience it that way at the moment, from the standpoint of trying to figure out how are you going to actually pay people in some sense.
Hello, my name is Orsi. I'm from Budapest, a consultant at Day, but for fun, I read science fiction, and my question is related to that a bit. Let's assume that in 50 or 60 years, artificial intelligence gets to the point when it can just replace the government and analyze all data, look at finances, demography, people's preference, and also have the power to make the best decisions and design policies. Would you prefer or accept such a government instead of our more human but maybe less efficient methods?
Are you implying that you currently detect intelligence in the government?
Yeah, you're setting the threshold too low.
Anyone want to pick that up?
Great question.
Wait, Peter. Peter. Oh, sorry, Peter, go.
Yeah, why do we need government? That's another question. I think technology gives individuals a lot of power. It gives private companies a lot of power, right? You see how big the tech companies are now. They're competing almost with governments right now. In terms of, in America, they're lobbying the governments almost, but they have to still go through the government. If they couldn't, if they didn't have to, they wouldn't, right? So I think tech gives power to individuals and private companies more. So then the government will obviously decrease, and we'll be like, why do we need a government if so much of it can be automated?
Yeah, I'm going to quote here someone that I rarely quote, and I think it's going to be strange that I quote him, Friedrich August von Hayek, who is neoliberal, and he was wrong on 99% of the things, but he was right on one thing, when he actually said that the job of politics is not like the job of an engineer. It's not like you know the outcome and you just have to calculate your way towards the outcome. Politics is about the negotiation of interests, and machines can't negotiate human interests. So I don't believe that machines can replace politics in this sense, because politics isn't really about a one-way process to a given goal. We're actually talking about what the goal is, and it isn't about what's the best way, knowing the data, processing the policy. This isn't what politics is mostly about. That's expert work. Politics is about setting goals.
But I mean, you have machine learning, right? So you can put an input in, like, what do you want? You want a great society. Okay, let the computers figure it out. That's literally what it is. That's machine learning. It's probably not as fast now to do that, but in a few years, for sure. Why can't a computer do that? I don't get it. What's the difference there?
Well, there's a lot of competing notions of what the good society is. That's the one
so
problem.
you
have to solve the sort of conceptual problem first.
But you can let people negotiate. You can let people vote online, for example. That's a good example of just literally every week you get an email from the government. Do you want this or do you not want this? You get a little bit of populism there, so you need to fix that. But computers can figure it. You can have a human input as well.
I want to actually partly support this in terms of what is it that you actually need to preserve about politics, however mechanized you get. I think it's the issue of accountability, okay? And accountability basically boils down to the idea that you can reverse decisions that have already been taken, whether it's been by humans or by machines, okay? And that is the great virtue of having regular elections, assuming people actually vote in them, okay? And that there's a problem with democratic participation in politics, but it seems to me that this is the kind of the great kind of reality check that democratic politics can provide, is regular elections where everybody participates.
So what if there are elections every week in your email?
that's because policies are complex things. This is why it's important to think about time frames, right? Because you're not going to have enough time to implement anything to see if it actually works. So you can't just have it every week for everything. I mean, you have to allow some things to go on for several years, 4 or 5 years perhaps, and then on the basis of that, you treat that as a kind of social experiment, and then you have the right to say, no, we're not going to go any further.
But it's a very good question, because it forces us to consider what is sacred about the human. It seems to me in AI, it's the letter A that causes us the concern, isn't it? Artificial. We're all in favour of intelligence. But you're really asking about what are the limits of the human, and it's actually, in democracy, it's something about wanting to know that in the end, our peers, our fellow human beings are in charge and not something else.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that maybe we don't have to speculate. There's a writer called, I think he's Vitaly Buchkin, who writes for Bitcoin magazine, and he wrote a 4-essay series of essays about using the blockchain as a decentralized decision-making machine. First of all, that could be used to run corporations. That was his main idea. So you decentralize decision-making. You get rid of the old kind of model, and Facebook and Google and all of these companies, they're actually very old-fashioned command and control, top-down companies. Getting rid of that structure and outsourcing decision-making to the blockchain was this model. Now, that's already started happening, and I've had many people talk to me about companies, startups mainly, that are already doing this. And they talk about the potential for using this as a governmental system. Well, there we have it. We have startups as petri dishes for possible future governments. Will it work? Won't it? I have no idea, but I do worry about our stupidity, because I know humans are really, really dumb sometimes. And I think that we're eminently dumb enough to actually outsource all our decision-making to something that's less capable of making decisions than we are, and then we'll sit around complaining about it.
Hi, I'm Zoltán, and I'm studying business and also molecular bindings. And we're talking about stuff that will be in the future from 25, 50 years from now, how the government will be affected by technology, how the AI will take over our jobs or even our existence. But Peter Thiel had a controversial article last year, and he said that 25, 50 years ago, we were dreaming about flying cars, and what did we get? 140 characters. Or our iPhone has more calculating capacity than the whole Apollo program that took humanity to the moon. Are we really advancing in technological fields in deeper meanings?
Well, we're going to space again, you know, SpaceX, so...
It's such a good question. As I say, some things change, some stay the same. We're wearing clothes with buttons on. Most of us still sit at desks, actually. Many of us still go to offices. So for all that the machines get shinier, cleverer, faster, more powerful, actually... So the technology in itself, in its own terms, you know, with Moore's law and so on, is getting more impressive and more capable. Perhaps us, the software, the human software, isn't matching that speed, I don't know. Or maybe it's good that we don't change and try and ramp up our own activities at the same speed as we'd go crazy if we tried to double our processing power every year. But you raise a very interesting thought.
I would have thought that unless we change our energy supply, space cars would be a nightmare to the environment, so it's just as well we don't have them. Okay, I mean, so you got to think about, you know, what would be the consequences if these things came about. They may have, in fact, caused more harm than what we have at the moment. So just because we were wishing those things 50 years ago doesn't necessarily mean that the fact we don't have them is a bad thing.
Okay, we're under like last minute and 30 seconds. I have a question, which is about communication, because when I think about how technology has changed our life, it's about communication. So and how we communicate more, but I'm old enough to say I kind of feel like maybe we are less deeply connected in some way. So if anybody texted or emailed more than 20 people today, raise your hand. 15. 1. Raise them high. 10. All right, you've all just been sitting in a conference, but and the question, all right, good. I mean, the question is really like, we communicate more, but is the depth of communication and connectivity with other human beings actually less? And would people who grew up like this actually know the difference?
I think you get more if you want. Like, look at Tinder. Maybe a lot of people didn't want to be in long-term relationships. Maybe they wanted short relationships. So we get more of what we want.
As if that were a good thing.
All right, well, thank you. Please join me in a great round of applause. This was a fantastic panel. And you all made my job so much easier. You asked so many questions. I didn't have to do anything. I could have been replaced by a machine. Thanks. All right, and next...